You've talked about national divorce a few times. I've seen a couple of videos recently where you're responding to articles. It's kind of cool. Um, can you talk about this idea of national divorce and as it stands today, arguing for it maybe, and if you could, just out of curious in the context of those videos, if you can steel man an argument against national
So I
divorce.
was the first one to kind of bring this issue back into the national conversation. I wrote a piece for Observer in 2016. Then Jesse Kelly had a piece a few months after that. Dave Boy just recently did a piece on his Substack earlier this year. And it's become enough of a mainstreamed idea that paleontology outlets like the National Review have felt the need to respond to them. So the point being that America has had at least two cultures since the beginning, and that there's absolutely no reason, and these cultures in recent years, and this was in 2016, not mentioned 2021, have been increasingly antagonistic toward one another and have even lost the ability to communicate. They're using language in different ways, and that there's no reason for this to continue any further. And just you live your life, we'll live ours, and goodbye and good luck. There's no harm, no ill will. Now there's lots of arguments against them. Some of those are completely, I think, stupid. The stupidest one is, well, that's what China wants. Okay, well, I mean, I'm not going to live my life saying I'm just going to do the opposite of whatever China wants. That's not logic. That's not a good pathway. Now, I'm not saying they're right or wrong, but that's not a reason one way or another.
Yeah, you bring up China or Russia, that's exactly what China or Russia want. But sort of the strong way to phrase that is it weakens America, like not just the one America, but like both sides in the divorce will be much weaker than they individually were together. So in that sense, not that you have to care about what China thinks, but like it's a big step backwards.
Yes, I think in the short term, it is absolutely a big step backwards in terms of power. There's no question that, when you're trying to reestablish a society, there's going to be a transition period. That transition period is going to be costly. Each side starts wondering, wait a minute, why are we still doing this? We don't have to anymore. We're not living with them, so on and so forth. So that's going to be a concern. I don't think that the whole point of America, or even a large or primary point of America, is to be a bulwark against Chinese power. And there's going to be very few people on Earth, given my work, who have as much informed hatred and contempt for the Chinese government as I do. Certainly, next to the North Korean people, maybe the people from Eritrea, there's few populations who I'm as worried about as the people under the rule of the Red Chinese. My steelman argument is there's no way this is going to be peaceful because the lines don't separate out well. So all you're doing is basically just replicating the problem, because the disparity isn't between, like during the Civil War, North and South. It's like it's between New York City and upstate New York, or between Chicago, downstate Chicago. Once you get outside of LA and like Sacramento, California in many ways is like Kentucky. So it doesn't make sense. So that's a strong argument.
I mean, you've talked about that this process will be painful. Right. It can be pain, and we're not just talking about violence. It could be just even the Civil War. You could divide it somewhat cleanly. Obviously, the kind of national divorce you might be suggesting is people are living amongst each other, so you have to literally move. It's complicated,
right? So that is a very strong argument. It's I think a cogent argument against it. Two is it's not just China; it's that there's a lot of bad actors in the world who maybe aren't, like China certainly wants to carry itself and have an appearance, at least on the world stage, as civilized and a leader. There's lots of smaller countries who, without us, are going to feel comfortable doing some very nefarious things. And they're not going to be scared of us anymore. And so that would be a bigger concern in many regards than China. So I think that's a reasonable one. It could be that both sides, if this happens, are going to, instead of work toward better, are the things that make each side bad would get worse.
Yeah.
And that's, having those push towards the malevolent extremes is, I think, a very legitimate criticism and a concern.
I mean, as you suggested, there's no guarantee that won't happen.
Correct, at all. Also, there's I think a reasonable argument to make is like, are you America just as a symbol and the myth of America? And I don't mean myth in a negative sense. Do you really want to throw that in the garbage? Like this meant a lot for a lot of people and a lot for history. You're just going to be like, okay, good work. We're done here. Let's shut the lights. So that's, I think, a reasonable argument. So those are the biggest ones, I would say.
And still, what is the case for national divorce, and along which lines? So, like, in making the case for national divorce, if it is desired, based on which kind of ideas do you think it should be carried through?
Honestly, I don't know that it has to be idea based. Like, for example, when Czechoslovakia broke up, when Norway and Sweden broke up, it wasn't really ideological. It was more cultural. So I always say divorce into two, but it would probably make more sense if it was like five, because the Northeast, certainly New England, has their own culture. The West Coast has their own kind of culture. I don't know. The thing is, any kind of persuasion technique, right? Like once people there's a difference between convincing someone they want to buy a car and what features you want. So if you're at the point where we're arguing about the features, then my work here is done. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't have a dog in the fight in terms of what it's going to look like. I just want to get to the point where you're at least considering seriously the idea of breaking up America. And I would encourage people to go look at my article to see, which I'm sure the arguments still hold 5 years later.
Do you have a kind of vision of which of the two or which of the five? Like, do you actually have specific cultures or ideas?
I'll tell you exactly.
Yeah.
If I told you and everyone listening in 2014, we weren't that long ago, it was not long ago, which of these two things is more likely to happen? 2014. Texas secedes or declares secession from America, or Donald Trump gets elected president. Everyone's voting for Texas. Like in terms of prediction, which is more likely. So we had this one. So it's not at all unlikely we're going to have this one.
See, I don't know if that logic carries through. You can't just say, here's an unlikely thing that happened, therefore anything can happen.
I didn't say, you just earlier said anything could happen this episode, didn't you?
Life is suffering. I wasn't listening to half the things you're saying.
You said it.
I said it.
Yes, you said anything can happen.
I'm definitely not here. I'm like you with podcasts. I do a podcast, but I don't listen to it.
That's how I'm talking.
I'm talking. Okay. So, it can happen. But in which, I guess I'm asking, would you stay in Texas?
100%.
So Texas.
And I'd run for office probably. It'd be fun. I'm going to be the first president of Texas.
I attended a debate between Yaron Brooks and Yoram Hazony. I don't know if you know who that is.
The nationalist guy.
He wrote a book called The Virtue of Nationalism.
Yeah, I read that book.
And they actually did a podcast with him. They did a debate.
Oh, they both run here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It was quite interesting. And I tried to wear my Michael Malice hat. So
You're wearing it now. You borrowed that from me.
Yeah. It's funny because the metaphor applies across all of these level of collectivism. So he was arguing that for the power of nation. So he would be arguing against national divorce, but he was also arguing for marriage, the power of actual marriage between individuals. Like, I think he's a conservative, and what I really like about him is there's a clear philosophy of conservatism that he expresses, and I think a lot of people get behind that philosophy because to me, like, conservatism and liberalism often is very kind of used loosely.
Yes.
He has a clear philosophy that he's expressing there and is grounded in tradition. He has a lot of value in tradition. And so it's the thing you said about America. Like one of the arguments against national divorce is like, listen, we've been at it for a while. Like there is a lot of value in the fact that we've been at it for a while. Don't just throw it all away all the time. So he says, like, philosophically, he seems in a lot of walks of life, revolution should be avoided as much as possible.
I agree.
And so it's kind of interesting. So he makes the case that there's something fundamentally powerful about the nation, that we it's a nice way to group a culture. And so national divorce, I guess, goes against that. I mean, do you find some aspect of the virtue of nationalism, as you will put it, powerful?
Well, powerful in a good sense, or
In a good sense. So sorry, yeah, in a good sense, like it's
well,
good.
yeah,
It brings out the best in humans.
I don't know at the best, but it certainly brings out good things. I have that line I always say about I love my country. I hate the government because I love my country.
Yeah. So
Um,
there is a love of country.
I think
It's
but
valuable.
I don't know that that's the. I think it's also the case because the country happens to be America. Like I don't know if I was living in whatever. I don't want to insult someone's country. Um, Canada, yeah. If I was living in Canada, I don't know that it'd be much of a
This is a
patriot.
guy who calls basically every other country shithole country.
Yeah, that's true. That's
Yes.
that's the fact. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's you're either there's two types of countries, Texas or shitholes. Um,
Oh wow, you went full Texas. So you're okay burning the Northeast to the ground at this point.
okay, I'm hoping for it.
I'm hoping.
What they've done to New York City, I will never forgive these people. And I hope that they suffer enormously consequences for what they've done to New York. It's unconscionable, the assault that they've done, and have no remorse over how many creative outlets that they've destroyed.
Yeah, it's the cultural hub, cultural center of the world
Yeah,
in many
it's
ways.
just New York was this was the place where you go to put up your shingle and move the needle and make things happen. And I would understand if it was like, okay, we gotta suffer through this for a year, but we're gonna make sure all these businesses have a kind of safety net to make sure that they kind of get through and survive this, which they did to the banks in 2008, for example. And I'm saying this as an anarchist, and there was none of that. So burn it down and salt the earth. It's because it's like watching like a zombie. It's unnatural. It's an abomination.
So I mean, sort of on the white pill side of things, I don't know about you. Maybe I have a sense that both Silicon Valley, that for me personally, maybe I have the same intensity of feeling as you do about New York. It's just disappointing to see it be consumed with cynicism and a lot of other paralyzing forces. But I still have hope for that place. I think it's the Yoram kind of tradition hope that through momentum the strong reemerges. So like I have hope for New York. I think New York will continue, like not maybe on a scale of years, but on a scale of decades. It'll be ups and downs where it reemerges as a cultural center. I just can't imagine a place like New York. It's like Paris. There's going to be long stretches of time where it leads the world.
Paris has not been a cultural hub for a very long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
The days of Matisse and Picasso and Gertrude Stein are long gone.
It still is a hub.
Even London isn't London.
Yeah.
You're not the.
But what is then? London is still London. Paris is still Paris.
Yeah,
It's
but
just not the
London,
Paris of old. It's
right?
not London of old. London is still a place. It's a tech hub. It's a fashion hub. It's a music hub. I mean, it's still a pretty strong hub.
Yeah, but not like during the Beatles era.
Right.
It's not like, or during the Sex Pistols era.
But it could be just us romanticizing the past. Because what is a hub then?
No, it's not. We're not romanticizing the past, because a hub is the place where everyone on Earth our eyes are on you. So in the late '60s, in the mid '60s, excuse me, the British invasion, the Kinks and all these other bands coming out of Great Britain, like they were the innovators. This was the place that was happening.
Well, in that sense, like,
And Brooklyn, 15 years ago.
but I guess maybe in that sense, in the 21st century, geographical hubs are becoming a thing of the past. So like, you can be a hub in the digital space now. So like, it's not. Maybe you'll never have.
I think there will always be. What I'm saying, digital space makes it easier for, let's suppose, Cleveland to be a hub,
Right.
because all you need like 10 people who happen to live in Cleveland, or Akron was a hub, a minor hub.
All it takes is 10 to 50 people
Yeah.
to create and maybe even less. Maybe it's just 2 or 3 or 4
But
people.
I mean, there's been no shortage of articles talking about Austin and what's happening here. And I know some of Joe's plans, and you and I and Blair and all these other people that we know. My buddy Andrew Heaton moved here. He's just one of the best people I know. I'm really, really excited.